Good morning, everyone. We're going to reconvene in open session. Welcome to all in the gallery. I'd like to begin with Commissioners' reports and comments. And Vice President Baker, would you please begin, sir?
I don't have anything today.
Thank you. Commissioner Kiefer?
Yes, I have several things, actually. Last week, I believe it was, I attended the new teacher reception welcome at Williamsport High School. I know Commissioner Klein was there as well. Just a few thoughts about that. 159 new teacher positions were brought on this summer. That also includes some social workers and school counselor positions, which are also classified in that number. 159 new teachers. So school does start next week. Hope citizens remember that as they head out to work next week. You're going to see school buses for the first time in several weeks. So that might delay your commute to work. Give yourself a little more time and be patient with those little kids who might be riding that bus for the first time. Also, last week or the week before was our MACO conference, and I attended several seminars and sessions. I wanted to mention a few here. First of all, kudos to all of the employees who helped out at MACO. I think we had a good impression upon our peers, but in particular, Dave Hayes and Brittany Higgins gave a seminar presentation on emergency preparedness and what would you do in situations, and kind of retelling our situation that happened in South County as some examples. So that was very interesting, so thank you for that. And also Mike Piercy, our Director of Social Services, gave a presentation as well with some updates on new foster care laws and what we do here in Washington County. All very good. Probably the most fruitful conversation I got to meet with the Maryland Public Service Commission. They held a meet and greet for the counties, and I had a really good conversation with Jason Stanek, the chairman of that commission. Very approachable fellow, very interested in our concerns. The meeting that I attended, there was probably around 100 folks in that room there to meet the Public Service Commission. Only 4 individuals represented county government, which was a little disappointing. The other individuals, and that was myself, an individual from Frederick County, Baltimore City, and a county on the Eastern Shore. I can't recall that county, but we were the 4 county officials represented there. The rest were lobbyists, representatives from energy companies that had questions of their own that their interests might be competing with ours. So I did share with Rob and Kirk, our county attorney, some conversations that we had. When they found out that I was from Washington County, I got to speak first and ask my questions first. So that was interesting. The other question that I would have is I would like, Rob, if we could schedule on our agenda, this isn't related to MACO, if we could schedule on our agenda a discussion on how red line revisions work. I understand that is more than likely something that the commissioners may have approved at some point in the past, but if we could get some further clarifications. I know they're used to make minor changes and revisions to a site plan that may have been approved, something that was maybe overlooked. What defines that minor revision? I think that's important. That's been something to come up recently. And issues that I suppose would ordinarily go before the Planning Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals. I believe there's an opportunity to appeal those decisions. And if an issue is redlined, it doesn't go through a public body or a public hearing to make an objection or raise a concern about whatever that red line may be. So I think that we need to address how a citizen might be able to make or raise an issue about a red line revision that might be made. And so if we could have that as a formal agenda item, I would appreciate that. And that's all that I have.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Can I piggyback
Sure, go ahead.
about the Planning Commission? I remember years ago, it was brought before the commissioners to give the zoning board, I believe, the authority to make minor decisions when it comes to zoning issues. I don't know if you could check that out. I'd like to know what a minor decision would be.
Okay. Will do.
Minor revision or something. Okay.
Or the Planning Commission,
That would be with the zoning board.
Zoning Board.
Yeah, currently they have the ability to make some decisions, and it wouldn't have to come to the county commissioners, and I believe they're supposed to be minor. I just remember, I don't know, 6 years ago we talked about that. I'd like to know what the definition of a minor decision is.
Well, there's permission to approve variances administratively if they're within a certain standard. I want to say it's like 10% that can can be approved at staff level. But otherwise, the Board of Zoning Appeals either hears charges of administrative error or variances or special exceptions. And generally, those questions do not come to the commissioners. They're exclusively the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals.
So
No.
maybe we could be provided some examples or,
Yeah, we can do like a question and answer session.
Thank you. Commissioner Schmidt, please.
I also was at Mako. It was an excellent event. I went down with a huge mission, and I think everybody that was around me heard it about 10 times. But my primary goal down there was to talk about the Medicaid reimbursement, the $100 that our EMS get for Medicaid, and we got a lot of support from the counties, a lot of the other jurisdictions. I was able to talk to the governor's office also, and they asked, why haven't we heard about this before? Which was kind of funny. So we're working on that. There's a couple other hoops we've got to jump through to be able to get that before session starts in January. But that was a big thing. But I also want to thank some of our local companies that were down there representing Washington County. We had Big Cork Winery, Hadley Farms, Ivy Hill, Blue Mountain, and Red Heifer. We got a lot of positive feedback from them, and we were told they had the best wines, which I thought was nice. One other thing from Mako regarding solar and everything, I'd like to see if we can get put on the agenda less from Mako to talk about the PSC's decision on the solar, on how it works, and setting ordinances, what's the importance on there, what the ordinances need to be done. I'd like to be able to get him down here as an agenda item in the near future to help us with our solar ordinances.
We actually have planning that's going to give a presentation, and we can try to coordinate those back to back.
That's perfect. I did talk to Les, and he said he'd make it available that he could come up here.
All right, Commissioner Wagner.
I have a request for Rob, and Sarah's not here. Over the past, I don't know, 9 months since I've been here, there's been a lot of budget cutting in the form of personnel. Not so much we're eliminating personnel, but we're consolidating. We're not filling positions. For an example, HR is still not filled. I know you're working on it. Ag preservation, we reorganized that a little bit, but didn't have a operations manager in 911 for 14 months paying. Now, what I'm getting at with all this, planning with short planners, how much money to this date have we saved, and a personnel report on are we short and should we be short, and where's that money going? It seems like every week and I'm not throwing stones here. I just want to update. It seems like every week we hear of something not being filled, something short. I guess, where's that money going? Are we really shortchanging the county with personnel, which I'm not suggesting we are. I'm just curious. And why does it take so long to fill a position? And I can understand some positions, but some I can't. I mean, I'll go back to the operations. Why was it 14 months without a drop? One of the most important. And I'm not throwing stones, so I'm just questioning. We saved a lot of money in those 14 months there. We saved several months already in HR. Where's that money going? You know, I don't think any of us can answer that, can we? Maybe I'm just missing it here, but.
Yeah, there are 3 positions in the budget that weren't filled because of attrition. There are others that will be filled because of folks retiring that will be filled at a lesser lesser step to save money. You can recall during the budget season, we were looking for every way to reduce expenses, and attrition is one of those to attempt to reduce expenses and also afford the employees that are here the 2.5% increase. So if we weren't able to do that, the employees that are here we wouldn't be able to have budgeted in that increase for them. The one for the 911, since I've been here, and I think even prior to me, nothing has been held up in 911 to try to save money. We have not done that. There were some other positions that while the budget was in question, those positions were frozen. Yes, we did do that. But keep in mind, we do have 800 staff members here. So when we do lose one or two a week or maybe a few a month, that is going to happen in a staff of 800. I will be glad to report to you more quantitatively exactly what's going on with those numbers. Oftentimes what happens is that goes back to the operating budget. So you will often see somewhat of a surplus in our operating budget because of those losses. Positions take some time to fill. For instance, the HR director, the board openly moved that up to a grade 19 to try to get a more suitable candidate. In today's economy, it is hard to come by well-qualified staff, and I think we're seeing that across the board at all levels of our staff. So hopefully that explains some of it, and then I'll try to bring back.
Yeah,
a
I
more
just
quantified
like to see it
approach.
on and nothing fancy like a spreadsheet, because if we saved, I'm going to throw this out. If we saved $1 million, $2 million, that's a lot of money. I mean, when we had a 3.9 million deficit, and all of a sudden we saved a couple million, plus we've generated more income. I just want to see
Sure.
something simple. You can give it to court, and he can repeat. I don't care. Just something simple. I just want to see where it seems to me I can sit there on my hand and figure up $500,000, which is not even thinking about it.
Yes.
So, but anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you, Randy. Few things for me. I want to first thank all those.
Can I help real quick with one thing
Please.
I forgot about Mako?
Please, go ahead.
Big thing at the Mako, I'll say the big elephant in the room is they talked multiple times in different venues about the Kerwin Commission. Of course, we still don't have the funding formula, but they're talking $4 billion statewide, and that's with the big B. And in the finance meeting, they sit there and say, let's do half and half. So state costs $2 billion, and the counties have to pay the other $2 billion. When they looked at those numbers, we're all hearing about gaming revenue, sports gaming revenue. Looking at that, they think that's going to raise about $250 million. Gaming revenue is about $25 million. And then the legalization of marijuana, recreational marijuana, will be about $250 million in taxes. And everything else that they put up there, we were about $500 million towards that $4 billion amount. And to make that to cover that amount, the finance there, they said that's about a 53% increase in property tax to cover that amount. And you sit there and think about that's the $4 billion that they want. One of the other things that they were sitting there talking about is, if you sit there and look at what happened to all the counties 8 years ago, they took away highway user revenue. That was roughly $200 million statewide. They passed the pensions from being the state covering the Board of Ed's pensions to the county, and that was roughly $250 million. And those are huge hits to the county. And that's not even $1 billion, and they're looking at $2 billion. So that was the big update. They were not happy. These were finances, so it wasn't political. This was just saying, hey, here's the number. This is how we're going to have to do it. And so, of course, the funding formulas are not out there, but I just want to report on that. It was the finance meeting was not a pleasant meeting. So sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thank you for the update. First, thanks to all the employees who went to Mako. We need that representation down there. So for all those in attendance and being in those meetings and networking events, thank you. I was up at Penmar Park the other day. It was everybody's day on Sunday, and Faye Powers, her late husband, Jim Powers, have organized those concerts up there for over a decade or longer. It was well attended, and the amount of seniors and running the veterans everywhere. They were very appreciative of the county support of that program up there every Sunday. This past weekend was Williamsport C&O Canal Days. I happened to go down to the new Cushball Basin and the aqueduct, and the Rangers said they were completely booked for every ride for both days. So already the aqueduct and riding a boat through it has been successful. The Ag Education Center had their World Heritage Days and Spud Fest. One of the big things about Spud Fest is they had the large farm horses that plow up the ground, and the kids go out much like an Easter egg hunt and pick up the potatoes. But one of the most rewarding things was the hear a young kid say to her, "Daddy, thanks for bringing me. I remember being here last year." And the kids run out and get the potatoes. But one of the important things is to introduce our youth into the farming community and what agricultural is. And one of the biggest displays was the homemade potato chips. So thanks to all the people down at the Ag Board and the Rural Heritage Museum who volunteered their time to make those 2 days successful. I also went out to Smithsburg to their ice cream social chicken barbecue, and I was very pleased with their positive attitude. They complimented the commissioners on their willingness to work. They sold some additional vehicles to make more money, and they were all seen very happy the way things are going with them, and that was very refreshing. Again, their comments were very favorable to the commissioners and thanked us for working with them. And they have a new young guy who's the chief, and he's full of energy. Would anybody know his name again? Yeah, he's full of energy. He's our tomorrow's leaders with that type of energy. So thank you to Smithsburg EMS for all their cooperation. And I also did attend a new educators event at Williamsport with Commissioner Kiefer. It was very invigorating to see the energy in these, 159 new teachers, all willing to start their new job in a blink of an eye. 30 years will go by, and they will have had major impact on our youth. So I was very glad to attend that again. And on a celebratory type of note, but maybe saddened, county employee Earl Parashok is officially retiring. I guess today's his last day or something like that. Earl's worked in, I guess, the Parks and Rec, Buildings and Grounds departments over the years, and I ran into him up at Penmar, and there's a video of him doing Zumba up there, so that may surface one day. But I know Earl personally. I think Terry knows him personally. Earl put his heart into his job as a county employee, and that's very admirable. So for 34 years of his sacrifice and dedication to the county, I'd like for all of us to congratulate him with a round of applause. Even though he's not here, this will be seen. Thank you, Earl. I know you'll review the video. So with that, I'd like to move forward to reports from county staff. Is there any county staff? Please come forward.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Kondo, Deputy Director of Human Resources. I would like to request an official vote for a promotion which was discussed on July 16th. The promotion is for Chris Boggs to the position of Land Preservation Planner Grade 13, which was elevated from Land Preservation Planner Grade 12.
Commissioners, comments, motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous, thank you.
Also, I would like to request a hire for the position of Chief of Plan Review under the Division of Plan Review and Permitting. This is a grade 16, step 1 position. The reason for the vacancy is the resignation of Cody Shaw effective June 14th of this year. The position's full-time. It was budgeted. It was posted both internally and externally. There were 3 applicants, 3 interviews conducted. 2 were internal, 1 was external. We are recommending Rebecca Calamer for the position of Chief of Plan Review. Rebecca currently works as a plan reviewer for Washington County. She knows the county, state, and federal laws, ordinances, as well as county policies and procedures. Rebecca has 12 years of experience working with engineering blueprints and performing plan review. Rebecca is currently a county employee and has been for 4.5 years. Her current salary is $57,138.
Commissioners, thoughts? Motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Second.
First and a second, any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I'd also like a request to hire for the position of Maintenance Lead Worker Parks. This is under the Division of Public Works, the Department of Parks and Facilities. It's a grade 9, step 11 position. The reason for the vacancy is the retirement of Earl Pershuk. This is a full-time position. It was budgeted, and it was posted internally. There were 2 applicants and 2 interviews conducted, both internal. We recommend Michael Nelson for the position of Maintenance Lead Worker. Mike has worked for Washington County government for almost 20 years. He meets or exceeds the requirements of the job. Currently, he's been employed 19 years and 11 months. His current salary is $48,651 a year.
This is what grade?
It's a grade 9, but it's step 11 because of the longevity, how long Mike Nelson
I
has
think
been
under
here.
13, we don't need official vote, but a consensus approval probably would be appropriate since you mentioned it. Is that okay
Excellent.
with the commissioners? Consensus to approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other county staff, please come forward. Mr. Chisholm, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Just wanted to give you a brief update on Smithsburg and their progress thus far. It's been 3 months. As Commissioner Klein said, I think they're doing wonderfully. The community is certainly still behind them. They still are providing outstanding pre-hospital services to their community and the surrounding areas. To date, they've been able to reduce their workman's comp bill by $1,000 a month. Their fund drive has been issued, and they are on par with last year's collections. They've changed their billing practices, and they're seeing a little bit of an increase in the billing per month over the last month, so that's a positive for them as well. They continue to have SEK work on their 401k audit to make sure that all of their benefits packages are what they should be and make any corrections that are necessary to that package. As Commissioner Klein mentioned, they have sold some vehicles. They've sold all but one, resulting in a $55,000 profit to the company so far, and they're working on getting rid of the other vehicle. Along with that, they're also selling some miscellaneous equipment to increase their reserve funds. Operationally, as Commissioner Klein pointed out, Danny Young is the new volunteer chief of the organization. Very young, very enthusiastic.
Yes, indeed.
He's getting acclimated to his position and working with all the staff out there. They've also hired one new EMT who has started working, and they have a new paramedic coming on board who is going through the Maryland licensing process, and then he'll be on board as well. Administratively, they continue to work on reviewing all their policies and procedures and personnel handbooks and bylaws to make sure that they're all agreeing with each other and ensure continuity amongst the documents. So overall, very pleased with their progress. They've been completely open during the whole process, and it's a good working relationship.
Commissioners, any questions? I'm very impressed with their progress. Thank you for that update.
As am I.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, I'm John Hart. I'm the Assistant Director of Fire Operations at the division. Just to give you an update, we have not heard yet back on the SAFER grant. I would anticipate that we should hear something in the coming weeks. So we are still very optimistic and enthusiastic that the grant will deliver assistance in hiring 29 firefighters. Just to give you an update on the rest of the process for hiring, we are conducting a second written entrant exam tonight. After the first entrant exam and physical agility process, we had approximately 35 candidates come out of the back end, which really a lot of those candidates are not looking for full-time employment, they're looking for part-time employment. So in terms of having a big enough candidate pool to hire 29 full-time firefighters, the pool is not big enough. We anticipate that after this process, after this written entrant exam, and after we've scheduled another physical agility test on the 5th of September. So we anticipate that afterwards we will have approximately 70 or 60 rather candidates on the eligibility list, and we hope that we will have enough of those candidates who are looking for full-time employment to fill the 29 full-time positions we hope to get through the SAFER grant. Finally, I'd just like to thank Sheriff Mullendore, who has agreed to help us with doing the background investigation on the candidates as we get towards as we identify the candidates that we would like to hire. And that's a relatively lengthy process, but it really does ensure that we are hiring candidates of impeccable repute. And so that's basically where we are. If anybody has any questions about that process or any other process, I'd be happy to answer them.
On the SAFER grant, I thought initially thought maybe June, and then now we're here. Is there any way, I know it's federal, right? Federal, is there any way that, seems to me that, you don't hear anything about it. Is there any way we have congressional or legislative, somebody can reach out and try to see where we never really know when it's going to happen, but somebody knows when it's going to happen, when it's going to be announced. Is there any contacts we can make to see about what we really would expect this to happen?
I could certainly reach out. What I would tell you right now is that there's nobody in this process that's been advised that they have been awarded a SAFER grant.
Right.
And last year, it was September when they started announcing the awards.
Okay, well then, yeah, I'm not sure why I think I was under the impression it'd be June or July. No big deal. I'm just, if that's what it was in preceding years, then yeah, be patient and wait if it's usually around September, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And then the reason that is, there is some confusion about that because in the NOFO, they basically say that grants will be awarded sometime after June. And
I got you.
After July
Okay.
1st. And you're not,
That's
what are
where
you
it
supposed to
came
do with
from.
that information? It
I
makes it
got you.
very difficult to plan.
Then one other question on the 60 candidates potential, you had round one and round two. Did they all have to adhere to, you guys have a standard that they have to pass? Did they all have to pass that standard or?
Yeah, so there are certification requirements that they have to bring with them, and that's a threshold for even coming to take the exam. So everybody we test, we know has the threshold requirements for the position. And then going through the physical agility test, that is the process by which we ensure that they have the physical stamina and strength to do the job.
Gotcha.
Commissioners, any other questions? All right. Thank you for your
Thank you.
updates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other county staff, please come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator. Joining me, Mark Bradshaw, Deputy Director of Engineering Services. And also to answer any questions you may have, Jill Baker, Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning. The county owns a parcel consisting of 21.34 acres on Pennersville Road in Cascade. The parcel has one well house located on the parcel. Staff is seeking board approval to put the 21.31 acres in forest conservation mitigation for future projects. When preparing CIP projects, the county must comply with Forest Conservation Ordinance. The ordinance encourages developers in the county to comply with the ordinance by having on-site retention of forest area. When the on-site forest retention cannot be achieved, the county can retain existing forest off-site or do payment in lieu of. This parcel has an estimated forest conservation value of $278,000 to $334,000. That would be well above the price that we would market the property for if declaring that surplus. Do you have any questions at all?
Restate your request.
Board approval to put the 21.31 acres in forest conservation mitigation.
I would.
Commissioners, comments?
Is this being brought to us? Do you have a project plan for it or anything like that?
There's one current project on the board that would require 0.80 acres.
And what's that project?
The northern pump station where we're going to build to take the Mulgisville sewage flow back to Conicajig. Part of that project, I have a forest mitigation of 0.8 acres. So either I have to create an easement of 0.8 acres on some land somewhere, or I have to pay in lieu of, which is approximately $12,000.
So this request is going to be for future county requests, not,
This would be for future CIP if I have another CIP project or if Scott has a road project. Most of our projects are linear in nature, and we only acquire the land necessary for the project, so we don't have the extra areas to create these forest conservation easements. But this parcel up there is 21 acres, and it is all wooded. And we also have a wellhead on it, and there's wetlands on it and other environmental sensitive things. So it makes sense to go ahead and just continue to put forest conservation easements on it for my projects, and then also for future projects down the road that I may have or Scott may have.
That was my question. So this is for future county projects only?
And
Yes.
these are the offsets to meet those requirements of
Yes.
soil conservation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes a lot of
Forest
sense to me. Why do we own that land anyway? Just curious.
We actually, you see where it says well house? That's one of the
Right.
wells that we use
One
for
of
the
the wells.
public water system up there. It's part of our water system. The county bought that land at one time thinking of putting a wastewater treatment plant up there.
Okay, that's what I
And
was
then
asking.
at a later date, the county acquired the treatment plant from the fort, when the fort was actually active. So the treatment plant wasn't required, so we've had it for several years now.
I'd motion Jeff to accept the proposal on the,
Yeah, I have a motion. Is there a second? Any other discussion on this proposal? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other county staff? Krista? Then we'll go to you.
Commissioners, we're requesting through the Washington County Community Health Advisory Commission to appoint Ms. Jennifer Foltz to serve a first full 3-year term from through August 31st of 2022.
We have a proposal. Is there a motion to approve? Motion approved. First?
Second.
Second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
We're also looking to appoint on the Washington County Disabilities Advisory Committee. We're looking to appoint Ms. Sarah Thornton to serve a vacant seat August 31st, 2022 as well.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion, is there a second? First and second, any other questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Approved, thank you. Administrator Slocum, would you have some comments, please?
A few comments, thank you, sir. First, at Mako last week, as been discussed, we will invite Les up. Steve has been requested and was already in the process of making a presentation regarding solar, the effects of the preemption on that. What we did here is that the more the planning and zoning process is in place for the county, the more control the county can have, although there is preemption from the state, meaning the state can largely dictate what happens with those facilities. At Mako, I'd like to applaud Dave Hayes and Brittany Higgins for making a presentation, interactive presentation, in fact, at Mako regarding part of it was the South County Experience emergency planning for that, so very nice job from them. Also, at Mako, Brittany Higgins, Susan Small, and Carmen, as well as some of their friends and family members, participated in helping with the services that Commissioner Smith pointed out of Hadley Farms and Big Cork Winery and so forth. They actually dedicated quite a bit of time to that effort, and I'd like to thank them very publicly for their efforts in that. A wonderful presentation by Washington County. I think you'd all be proud of what we saw there. At Mako, MDOT Secretary advised slightly more HUR will come, and we will have the official numbers in early September. Very interesting that about half of the transportation funding does go to transit. So we are certainly starting out with the block set back a bit just to begin with here in Washington County regarding transportation funding and programmed increases over years. I believe he indicated that 4% per year increase in the transit budget is mandated, where his increase for roads and other transportation facilities at 2.5%. So that was helpful information, but not, unfortunately, not good information for us to here in Washington County. A debriefing of the infra grant was held, and we learned that as far as cost competitiveness, we could certainly make better strides there. So we will be presenting when the Secretary comes in October to request some further advances in how we can be cost competitive, and additional strategies for intelligent transportation systems and more notification to the public during crashes, and how the Public Safety Training Center can help in that. And we may even look for an EOC out there to help us. Every little bit helps as we try to program the third lane for both interstates. And finally, Smithsburg and Fort Ritchie Road sustained some damage during the windstorms, which I believe were Thursday night. Staff has been helping to try work with Smithsburg for some of the fallen debris, and we will have the street sweeper up there. And lastly, Friday evening into Saturday morning, I'd like to thank Dave Hayes, Scott Hobbs, and others. I believe Bucko, unofficially is his name, the chief for Potomac Valley, was out there. Yes. So thanks to them. The slide was observed by the consultant who's been monitoring it and deemed to be safe. We do already have, from the highway department, we already have some barriers out there, and the road is back open, but we will be programming with the National Park Service to have the design and the construction repairs completed as urgently as we can get them to move forward on that.
So the project lead is the National Park Service.
That's right. They own that. We own a easement through that is our road. So it is their lead, and we are working diligently with them to try to get it completed.
Rob, just a quick statistic question. Maybe it's more directed for Dave. How many public safety training centers do we have throughout the state? I don't know, just email me sometime and let me know.
Yeah, we can certainly find that. I don't know that I can quote that.
I just thought of that as he was talking about the,
State facilities included? There's 6
I guess county-owned.
county-owned.
Yeah.
There's probably about 5.
Yeah, I think Dale Hill mentioned he had visited 5 himself. Dale Hill, the late Dale Hill, had visited 5, if I remember.
There's 6 state training facilities in addition to those.
That was just a question. Thank you.
Good information to have. Thank you. Any other staff reports? Citizens participation. Please come forward and state your name. Anyone here today like to participate? All right, seeing none, we'd like to go to the next agenda item, property acquisition for widening of Eastern Boulevard. Mr. Todd Moser, Scott Hobbs, please come forward.
Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator with Scott Hobbs, Director of Division of Engineering. Move to approve the option agreements for partial property acquisitions, including fee simple and/or easements for 1118 Click Way, 521, 531, 905, 907, 909, and 913 Antietam Drive, and to approve an ordinance approving said purchase and to authorize the execution of the necessary documentation to finalize the acquisition. Option agreements have been executed for the 7 above stated properties. Both the fee simple and easement acquisitions are shown in the table below. Properties were appraised in January 2019, and property owners were offered an accepted fair market value for the partial acquisitions. 1118 Click Way, 2,012 square feet and fee, 4,895 square feet in temporary construction easement, and 1,155 feet in perpetual drainage easement for a total of $26,600. 521 Antietam Drive, 978 square feet in temporary construction easement for $150. And 531 Antietam Drive, 1,195 square feet in fee, 1,206 square feet temporary construction easement for a total of $1,300. And 905, 907, 909, 913 Antietam Drive, 1,041 temporary construction easement, 349 square feet in perpetual drainage easement for a total of $700. Eastern Boulevard will be widened from 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, to 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction from Jefferson Boulevard, Maryland 64, to Antietam Drive, and the construction will occur in several phases of work as indicated in the CIP plan.
So this request is for future phases of work. We're currently in design in coordination with State Highway Administration for the intersection at Jefferson Boulevard and Eastern Boulevard. We anticipate construction to start next spring on that project, which On the map included is shown in red for Phase 1 Eastern, which will go from Jefferson Boulevard, have the intersection improvements at Jefferson and Eastern, and then widen from 2 to 4 lanes to Security Road. And then future projects, Phases 2 and 3 and extended, are forthcoming, and they're in the CIP. And this is for Eastern Phase 2, the partial acquisitions are, and also for Eastern at Antietam.
Commissioners, any questions, comments?
Just a curious question. Does that come over the railroad track there too, or is that widening?
The first phase does not, the second phase will. Phase 2 included, there'll be at-grade crossing, so we'll widen for an at-grade crossing from 2 to 4 lanes.
At grade crossing, do we have cooperation with, is it CSX?
CSX, yes,
Or cooperation with that?
yes.
Any comments? We want these parcels approved all at once, correct, together?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
I have a first. Is there a second? Second. First and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Claggett's Mill.
Morning, Commissioners. In 2007, Claggett's Mill entered into an APFO agreement relating to school capacity issues for the Claggett's Mill subdivision, which was being built on Poffenberger Road. That project is currently partially built. As you know, market conditions have changed since 2007, as well as the regulatory environment. The APFO, the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, has been amended since 2007, and the excise tax ordinance has also been amended since 2007. Currently, the APFO allows for a developer to make use of an alternate mitigation contribution when a development qualifies. This development would qualify to use that alternative mitigation contribution method were it not for the current agreement that is in place and has been in place since 2007. My understanding from the request from the developer is that the current value of the homes and residential lots, given the current value of homes and residential lots, the requirement of the 2007 agreement make the property unmarketable, as adjacent developers can offer effectively the same type of lot in a similar style community at a $15,000 savings per lot. Therefore, the developer is asking the county to approve the dissolution of the 2007 agreement. When that happens, they would have to comply with the current requirements in place, which would essentially mean that they could proceed pursuant to the ordinance's provisions allowing for alternate mitigation contribution on a per lot basis.
I guess the first question I have is, do we have somebody here that's representing?
And Mr. Sianovich is the engineer who's been involved with this project on a long-term basis.
You want to even state his name?
Yes, please state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Steve Sianovich. I'm a senior project manager with Fox and Associates. Our mailing address is 981 Monetna Road in Hagerstown.
I guess my question was, and I'm sort of looking at it here, is how many more lots are there in that subdivision?
At present, there are 48 lots platted. Section 2, which would finish the balance of the project, the entire south half of Poffenberger Road, would add another 100 lots for a total number of lots of 148 on the south side of Poffenberger Road.
And what's the plan for homes? I mean, what price range?
They have a few builders looking at it, and quite frankly, I couldn't really offer an estimate for the value of those homes.
Right now, you could offer an average of what the current homes that have sold would be. About how much were they? And the reason I'm asking is $500,000 home might be easier to absorb than a $300,000 home.
We did take a look at some of the sales history of the 48 or 47 lots. And, quite frankly, there was a range, from memory, 250 to 400. Some of those were initial purchase prices, others were sales and then subsequent resales of those homes. We did notice a trend where the value of the home really declined for a number of the lots from the initial purchase, let's say in 2007, to a sale or a resale that occurred subsequent to the initial purchase.
Has the size of the planned homes been scaled back?
I'm sorry, Kirk?
Has the size of the planned homes been scaled back? Has there been any changes to the?
Well, to give you just a brief history of the project, this was originally proposed in 2004. It was revisited in 2013 as, I believe it was file number PP 13002, where the developer took advantage of some zoning changes and actually tightened up the lots, if you will, to increase the yield. That 2013 plan approval was inclusive of acreage on the north and south side of Poffenberger Road. And from memory, that total yield was in the neighborhood of 264 lots. At present, there's a revised preliminary plat into the county, PP 19001, where we eliminated any development on the north side of the road, took it completely out of the equation, and looked at finishing the development only on the south side. Again, that PP 19001 file number would yield 100 lots, 48 are currently existing platted lots, for a total of 148 on the south side of Poffenberger Road.
So that's the side you're going to develop, the south side.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I guess for me, I just need some, I'm sorry,
You're good.
I just need some simple numbers. I mean, you've given us a lot of information there, but how many lots are affected by this $22,000 APFL?
The answer to that would be 100 lots would be affected by that, plus one lot that is hasn't been developed yet within the previously platted section. I would assume that if a building permit were pulled for that lot, it would be subject to that $22,000 number.
So we're talking 101 lots.
Correct?
Total.
Total.
148 was,
That's
you said
One-
there was 48 lots and then 100 lots, but it's 101 lots that'll be affected.
And again, the 101 is based on the 100 yet to be platted, plus one lot that wasn't developed.
When was the last time that a home sold in that development that was subjected to the current APFO fee?
I'm afraid I don't have that information.
Was it a year, 6 months, 5 years?
If I had to offer a guess, it would be closer or beyond the 5-year mark. I don't think it was 6 months or a year.
And in the letter that we received here, going back to Commissioner Wagner's comments regarding a 4,000 square foot home, it sounds like the plans may have changed, or there may be a new outfit that might help develop that property. Would we be building smaller homes and putting more properties, or are we limited to the 100 homes?
The
No
current
more-
proposal is to plat 100 lots within Section 2 of the development that would complete the south side of the development. So to answer your question directly, we're proposing 100 new lots, period, and not looking to narrow the lots up to get a yield of 120 or something greater than the 100 proposed.
So what's the maximum number of lots possible on this property that we're discussing here today?
On the south side, the maximum lots possible would be 148, which is made up of the 48 currently platted, plus the 100 that are proposed under the recent county filing, PP 19001.
So in simple terms, right now, every lot would cost $22,000.
Correct?
In the request, every lot would cost $2,900 basically, $2,891.
plus excise, remember?
Yeah, well, I know, it's excise, so that's $1 a square foot. Everybody's paying that, so I guess your issue is what was true then shouldn't be true now, because everybody's not paying that 22,000 now. To put you at a disadvantage because someone hasn't built one of those under those terms for maybe 3 to 5 years.
That's correct. I mean, a developer across the street that's not subject to this APFO could effectively offer the same lot
Right, I agree.
for a price of thousands and thousands of dollars less than we're able to do if we're subject to the 2007 APFO agreement.
Just out of curiosity, are you the only person here in the audience representing Elm Street?
I am. Unfortunately, the developer had another commitment out of town and wasn't able to attend today.
A couple weeks ago when we met with the Board of Ed, I had asked about a presentation to discuss with us kind of our history here in the county of APFO fees. I'm looking at some of the documents staff put together for us, and I think is it South High, which is 4 students away from state capacity with 60 students in the pipeline. Just personally for myself, I would like a little more information. I don't think the request is necessarily unusual or out of the question, but I would like a little more information on the history, just the history of where we've been, the prices along the way, maybe number of homes to be built under those guidelines, and
You mean like the build-out rate in which that would affect school enrollment?
yeah, the build out, maybe the revenues we've received. We'd heard some requests to build new schools. This is what that money goes towards.
Some of
we
the
have a lot
thought
of
process, perhaps, about how the APFO was established, we can work with our planning office for that.
I would kind of like that as a presentation. And then we have a lot of development out there with it. Is it Colonel Henry K. Douglas extension of that road? There's a lot of investment in that road as well. I would personally like a little more information before I would feel comfortable making a decision. Again, for me, not off the table, but want to make sure that some of the needs that we have coming up is met, and I think that's why APFO was put into place.
Commissioners, any other?
And I'd like to know how many other developments in Washington County would fall under the same purview.
Of some type of additional above and beyond the baseline.
How many others do we have out there that are going to be coming in if this is granted?
Commissioners on the other side of the room, thoughts?
I think they're both valid points.
Andy?
Yeah, a little bit more information on, I'm sort of on the fence on this one because I don't like to put anybody at a disadvantage, but all builders are at a disadvantage. Someone might pay $10,000 for a lot, and the next builder might have to pay $30,000 for a lot. So, it's how you buy and how you build and how much volume and cash flow. So I think I would have to agree that, we're going to build new schools no matter what it sounds like. Somebody's going to build them. Bigger and better, so I hear. Yeah, I think I need at least, I think Wayne had a good point. We're 4 over capacity at South?
4 under capacity with 6
4 under.
pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to see all the cards on the table. I'm obviously, I'm pro home builder, obviously. But then again, there's a whole lot of variables here. You are at a disadvantage at $22,000 a lot. But then again, maybe I didn't know what you paid for them. Maybe you're not at a disadvantage. So anyway, yeah, I without prolonging this, I agree to hold off a little bit.
Sum this up, what I'm hearing, I'm not hearing a yes or no. We want more information on school capacity and some other information. Commissioner Slocum, would you be able to provide that, and we'll reschedule this decision after receiving that information?
Yeah, as staff member, I certainly will, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, one of the 2 big things I heard is considerations for establishment of APFO at the time, an overview of APFO, as well as others above baseline. So,
I was Joking, I called you
Yes,
Commissioner. a minute.
thank you, sir.
Sorry about
He got promoted. Is that a promotion? I'm not even sure that's a promotion. is it?
Obviously, it is.
Maybe.
The stature of the 5 commissioners here.
that. No further discussion. Thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next on our agenda, express approval, Funkstown proposed annexation. Mr. Goodrich, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just before I go to my subject, your questions about the APFO and schools, that presentation is already in the works for you. We knew that you wanted that information, so I'm glad I was here to hear your discussion. We'll add some more information to that presentation, maybe 2 weeks from now, and we'll give you the full story.
Thank you.
And we'll also be doing something on solar energy in that very same vein for you in the very near future. Okay, good morning, everyone. Steve Goodrich, Director of Planning and Zoning. This morning, I'm here to talk to you about annexation again. This time, it's the town of Funkstown. The town is intending to annex 111 acres that is adjacent to its southeastern boundary. There are 10 parcels included in the proposal. These 10 parcels lie between alternate Route 40, which is the road between Funkstown and Boonesboro, Beaver Creek Road, which is the road between Funkstown and the dual highway, and Interstate 70. Those are the 3 boundaries on these 10 parcels. The 10 parcels are listed for you individually on the first page of your agenda report form, with the owner's names, parcel numbers, the acreage, and the current county zoning and the proposed town residential zoning that Funkstown would assign. You can see that 3 of those parcels are already owned by the town of Funkstown. 2 of the other parcels are very small. In the individual owners, the Saggy and the Schultz properties are very small. They already have dwelling units on them. And then the rest of the property is vacant at this point in time. In your agenda, you also have, in addition to that list in the agenda report form, you also have the letter from Mayor Crampton of Funkstown requesting the county's concurrence with the opinion that the county and the town zoning designations are similar enough that express approval should be granted. In fact, the town has stated it as, it's their opinion that express approval is not even necessary, but if the county felt that it should take that step, they're asking for express approval to be granted, and that's the way we're framing the recommended motion to actually grant the express approval. Also, you have in your agenda material a text of the town's advertisement for the public hearing on the annexation, which will occur on September the 9th. You have a copy of the resolution of the town to enlarge the town boundaries. You have the plat that shows all of the parcels that are proposed to be annexed. The property owner's consent for annexation, and in fact, this annexation was triggered by the property owner's request to be annexed into the town. The annexation plan, which includes the town's intention to assign the town residential zoning district to these properties. And then you also have, probably the most important part in making the decision here, is a list of uses from the Funkstown zoning ordinance, the uses that are allowed in the town residential district. On that chart, you have the uses listed in the first column on the left side. The next column is the status of those uses in the town residential zoning district. And then the last 3 columns in that chart are the status of those same uses under the current county zoning districts, which are residential urban and residential multifamily. We initially included residential suburban in there because we thought some of these parcels were in fact zoned that way, but we took a closer look at the map, and there was a mistake on the map that we had. So there really isn't any land now zoned residential suburban that needs to be considered. So that's all the information that you have in your agenda material. That's all the information that we looked at to to try to evaluate the request. As you go down this chart and the various columns, you can see clearly how the various zones and the uses compare between the town and the county. You'll see the permitted uses in the current county zones, and you'll also see the permitted uses in the Funkstown town residential. Very often, you'll see across each row, you'll see that a use that's permitted in the town residential district is also permitted in all of the county zones. In other cases, you'll see that they're permitted in Funkstown and it's a special exception use in the county. And in still other cases, you'll see special exception in the town and permitted in the county, and several other combinations like that. I've highlighted a couple of examples that need further explanation. They are further explained in the agenda report form. There are 4 items that need a little bit of further explanation, but I'd like to call your attention to the chart itself. And the very first item that's highlighted, I believe yours are in color, and there's yellow highlighting in the chart. The very first one, and I discovered this as I was preparing this morning, actually the highlighting is on the wrong row. What I want you to do is look at the row above for the use bed and breakfast, and then follow that over to the column on the far right side of the form. That's where the highlight should be, not the one below that. But my point is that a bed and breakfast is a special exception use in the RS and the RU county zones. It is not a permitted use in the residential multifamily district in the county, as the chart indicates that it is.
Say that again, Steve.
Okay, the chart indicates that a bed and breakfast is a special exception use in residential multifamily. That is not correct. It is not a special exception use. In residential multifamily, it is a special exception use in the county RU, and it is a special exception in the town residential district. So there are 4 cases like that of uses that need to be further explained, and they're discussed in the agenda report form. I just wanted to point that out. On the last page of this agenda material, you also have a chart that compares minimum lot sizes between the town residential zoning and the county districts. And you will find in all cases that the town's minimum lot size is larger than the county's minimum lot size. And I point that out because very often the concern of adjacent property owners is the change from the county to the town, and the fact that the uses that will be next to them will be different, or the development will be denser. And the point is that in the town, development will be less dense than it would be in the county for residential uses. And I provided you some figures in the agenda report form to support that.
Steve, there's no water or sewer, but the town says they have plenty to supply, correct?
Yes.
They can, well, I guess, with some of the zonings, multifamily zonings, I assume I know they have, but what's your thoughts? There's plenty of, there could be a whole lot of, and I'm sure that's part of the annexation, there could be a whole lot of multifamily there. I guess my only concern would be water and sewer, but they say they can supply it, so that's all probably it.
The town of Funkstown has its own sewage wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
And they are in the best position to know if they have the capacity to serve it, or if they need to improve their system. And that's all part of their annexation plan. It's not, it's certainly a question that you want an answer to, but when we're talking about express approval, it's not an item that we looked at to make a judgment about whether they are the same. The question of water is different. Hagerstown is the only public water system in the growth area, and they assign a certain amount of water to the town, and then the town can divvy that up as they determine fit. To my knowledge, it is sufficient to serve development or would have to be made sufficient when a particular development proposal is presented. That's important for you to know. There are no, to my knowledge, there are no concrete development proposals on the table at this point in time. At least they weren't submitted with the annexation proposal.
Commissioners, comments? Or
Just one quick question, if I could. The 41 acres, give or take, owned by the town, is that the property we helped with POS money a couple years ago to help secure? Okay.
Oh, good. Mayor Crampton's here in the audience.
Commissioner, any more comments or thoughts? There's a recommended motion.
I just know in the past with other municipalities, when they come in for annexations, we usually like for them to have a public hearing before they come to us to support the annexation. Do you anticipate any outcry from your town or your community?
The hearing's scheduled for September the 9th. And we feel like we needed to address this request as soon as we got it. And it's a piece of information that the town will have available when they do have the hearing that will help answer citizens' questions. I know your feeling from the past.
And all of your council members, do you have any opposition at all among your council? Yeah, some of the municipalities, there's not 100% support from council. That's one of the reasons we go to.
I'm sorry.
That's one of the reasons we like to see the public hearing for the community for it to take place before it comes, at least to me.
So all that information
They have
that I
100%
covered, everything that I supplied you in the agenda report for, and led the staff to the conclusion and to the recommendation that we're presenting to you to grant express approval to the town of Funkstown to allow the assignment of the town residential zoning
Let me
district.
sum this up then. We have recommended motion to approve, and we have a suggestion to wait till after the public
That
hearing.
wasn't a suggestion. I was asking,
Okay, well,
I was
I'm
just
trying to
making a comment
accommodate
as
your-
in the past, we have asked for
Well, commissioners' comments, do you want to move forward with?
I would motion to make a motion to express approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right, I have first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing up the comment about the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're running a little behind, Mr. DeVito. I'm going to ask for your patience to wait a couple of minutes and move forward to the public hearing that's scheduled at 11 o'clock. It'll be a public hearing request by organizations to be added to the list of nonprofits. The purpose of this hearing to hear public testimony concerning the matter. The procedure is as follows. We will first have staff introduce the matter, after which the hearing will be open for public comment to testify. After everyone who wishes to speak has done so, the hearing will close. The commissioners may then discuss the issue and take any action they deem appropriate, including adoption, rejection of the proposal, or they may take it under advisement and deliberate at a later date. Mr. Downey, would you please introduce?
Certainly. Commissioners, as you know, the Code of Public Local Laws requires that any contributions made by the county to nonprofit organizations has to be on an approved list maintained by the county. And the Code of Public Local Laws provides that the county commissioners may add to the list of those organizations when they make application. The application shall be made on or before the first day of August preceding the fiscal year in which the organization plans to request funding, and the county commissioner shall hold a public hearing on the application. The county has received applications to be included on the 1108 list. These are new applications, so they will be added to the other list of organizations that are currently on the list. The applications came from the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, Brooks House, Rise Up Hagerstown, Conococheague Little League, American Red Cross, Western Maryland Chapter, and Leitersburg Roritan Club, Inc. Just to remind the commissioners that if an organization is placed on the 1108 list, that does not mean that they are going to get any type of funding from the county. It simply means that they are eligible to request funding through the community organization funding process and the county's budgetary process. So again, this is just a first step, prerequisite if they want to move further in the process, they have to be approved by the commissioners to be on the list. I don't know whether there's anyone here from the individual organizations who may want to make a comment to the commissioners. If so, now would be the appropriate time.
Good question. We made sure all of these met the requirements of, I guess, 501c3s. They were all.
Yeah, they have submitted the material that is required, and their application is complete.
Welcome, please introduce your.
Good morning, Commissioners. My
and
name is
address,
Johan Worley.
organization.
I'm with the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I was asked to provide some additional brochures for the.
Please come forward. Would you spell your name for our records, please?
Sure, the name is spelled Johann. Last name is spelled Wehrle.
Thank you very much.
And I'm personally based in Williamsport, Maryland, and I have a short statement. Again, my name is Johan Worley. I represent crime victims in Western Maryland. I'm one of about 15 attorneys who provide legal services to crime victims across the state. Our organization, Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, is listed in the brochures that law enforcement is required to hand out to crime victims when they respond to calls. I spend about half my time, or 20 hours a week, in Washington County. The rest is spent in Garrett and Allegheny counties. Our brochures are in the local commissioner's offices. I regularly work with Joe Ritter and the prosecutors at the state's attorney's office down the street. Referrals come from a wide variety of sources. Includes the internet, word of mouth, the commissioner's offices, the state's attorney's offices, the victim witness coordinators there, CASA here locally, and DSS. Crime victims do have a number of rights, the denial of which are appealable, and they're generally identified as the rights to notice, the right to be present, the right to address the court, and restitution. Locally, I might put on a multi-hour restitution hearing that the state's attorney perhaps doesn't have the bandwidth for. I might get the parole commission to revisit a parole decision they made at MCI without victim input. I might convince a prosecutor that a victim has the right to address the court at a violation of probation hearing. Or I might give a prosecutor that something extra so that the case doesn't get dismissed or put on the shelf. I filed memoranda with the local court on the operation of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. I filed objections to motions for bond. I filed earnings withholding orders for restitution for victims. We assist crime victims from securing process against criminals in the beginning to attending parole hearings and literally sort of everything that pops up in between. We're always on the lookout for any new or additional funding. I personally did get some grant money this year from a charitable trust called Ruth Tingersley that's based out in Arizona. Right now, Charles County is funding the cost of a paralegal or a victim advocate to assist our attorney there. I'd like to be able to secure help to fund a part-time assistant for Washington County. That way, I think we can serve more local residents and do it more effectively. I think after doing this for a few years, I'm personally surprised in some ways that there's such a robust demand for our services. It's a two-party system. It's not enjoyable sometimes to sort of be the Ralph Nader of in sort of the 2000 election here, where we have offense, defense, and then the crime victims attorney who sort of comes in and sometimes complicates matters. But I think by and large, we do a pretty good job at pushing the ball forward for crime victims locally. I'm hoping that the inclusion on this, the 1108 list can be a good first step to better to meeting the local demand for our services, and I appreciate your time. Any questions?
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward to testify? Do the commissioners have any other questions? I would now state that the public hearing is now concluded. Commissioners, comments, thoughts? Mr. Downey, I have a question of the approval of the applicants. Is that done today or after review by another agency or grant manager?
The commissioners can take action today, or they can take the matters under advisement and bring it up at a later date if they so choose.
I guess my question is, have these organizations listed been approved or vetted for qualification?
They have met the requirements that they need to get their application here to the public hearing before the board.
Commissioners, is there any action you want to take, or you want to deliberate later?
I don't mind any opposition. I'm okay with moving forward.
Okay, is that a motion to approve? Is there a second? Second. I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. 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 Unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. DeVito, I'm going to go back to you. You've been very patient. Thank you very much. You're next.
Speaking, while Dan gets situated, speaking of the request earlier today, this is one of those positions that, as we look to streamline solid waste and make that as efficient as possible to keep the fees down out there and rates down, this is one of the presentations for trying to be as efficient as possible.
Good morning. Again, this is what we are requesting is a motion to approve the consolidation plan for the solid waste department. The opening was created by a retirement in January of Kathy Mills. And what we are proposing to do is to take the two positions, Tony Drury, who was a grade 14, Kathy was a grade 15, combined the positions of deputy director and I think her name, what was her position? Assistant director. Assistant director and recycling coordinator, combine those two positions and promote Mr. Drury to those positions. That would require a grade increase for him. He was a grade 14. Kathy was a grade 15. Since January, Mr. Drury has been performing those duties, and in turn, according to county policy, has been compensated with a temporary upgrade. And what we're asking for in this motion is to make that promotion permanent. I guess we could make it simple with this and hopefully make it simple and divide it into three areas. First one is to make Tony Drury's that superintendent position permanent and promote him into that position. The second one would be to change the exempt status for the superintendents throughout the division. Currently, we have one superintendent in solid waste and 3 in water quality. The 3 in water quality are exempt. The one in solid waste is not exempt. What that means is the one in solid waste is eligible for overtime. The ones in water quality aren't. After I reviewed the guidelines, the federal guidelines for requirements of not exempt and exempt with the Deputy Director of HR, we both agreed that all of these positions should be considered working positions, working supervisory positions, which would qualify them for a non-exempt status. So,
Can I interrupt for a minute? You're proposing overtime, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Eligibility for overtime.
Eligibility for how many throughout the county has that same eligibility?
In that particular position, I would.
Well, not the position, the grade or whatever. How many? I know for a fact that, and I'm not trying to create a bumper. I'm just curious. I know for a fact that we have employees that work 60 hours a week and don't get overtime. I guess that's what concerns me.
Commissioner, I wish I could answer your question, but in reality is when we reviewed these positions, we took these federal guidelines and I asked for a review so that we could have some kind of consistency between in the division. I don't want to have one superintendent grade 15 getting overtime and 2 and 3 other ones.
Oh, I understand, but I can't have somebody in your department, at least in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, y'all jump in here, getting overtime and then somebody over in this department not eligible for the same overtime. That's not going to be great for morale either. Okay, they get overtime over there, but we're working 60 hours a week and get a salary. You see what I'm getting at?
And you're making them eligible, by making them eligible, federal guidelines, you have to do it, but why are we making them eligible? Why don't we have another employee to do the work instead of having a working supervisor? Why are we cutting back and eliminating positions? Now we're going to mandate overtime to a supervisor. Right?
I think if I could help from a different perspective, Dave is saying that the current employee out or the position at the landfill was getting overtime. And that may be because they often work 6 days per week. Is that accurate? So that may be one of the criteria by which they were afforded that time. What he's saying is that he's got supervisors of the same position he approached in his division, the HR director, deputy HR director, for consistency. The only exception would seem to be that landfill position does work 6 days per week, which is a difference, and that may have been something that was set forth at the time the position was created.
And we regularly have situations in the Department of Water Quality where we call out, where we need our superintendents on the job at all hours, and they've worked countless hours, countless days in a row, countless hours without the benefit of overtime because they are working superintendents. And
I understand.
what I
I
would suggest
understand
to you
that.
is that if there's other positions in the county that are eligible and meet the guidelines, then, I can't speak for other divisions and other departments. But I see your point, and I think that, based on what we're looking at within our division, the four superintendent positions that we have are very similar. They're very similar in their responsibilities. They're very similar in the way that they are eligible for call-out, that they're responsible for call-out. They're responsible to work anytime that we need them to work. And it's just that, and I can't answer the question why solid waste in the past was given that non-exempt situation where our people weren't. I strongly believe that our people need to be made the same.
And for my situation, I can't, I want everybody to get paid, and I'm definitely all on board with county employees, but I can't, in fairness to DES, let's take them sitting right there. I know there's supervisors there, or whatever you want to call them, operation managers that work long hours and don't get overtime. So how can is that fair?
I don't know.
I understand.
Right, let me interrupt. Bob, have you completed your presentation, or you have another
Well,
third part?
that's part of it. Then the third part would be that we take a experienced part-time person and make them promote them to a grade 11 from a grade 8, and create a position of customer service to allow for when Dave and Tony are called away from the zone. We're required to have supervisory positions at the landfill when there is at all times it's open. If Dave and Tony are called away at any given time, that part-time person would be able to fill in for customer service. The rest of our Department of Water Quality, we've begun a position of cross-training, and part of the responsibilities of those superintendents that I'm talking about in the water quality would be to be available to help with solid waste and to be able to fill that supervisory requirement.
Okay, does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
Just a quick question. So the customer service coordinator will be a supervisory position. Will they have working knowledge of the landfill?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And is that a full-time position?
That's a part-time position.
It's a part-time position, okay. Is there anything, real quick if I could,
How's part-time supervisor?
is there anything in our permit with the MDE that would prevent a part-time position from being a supervisor?
Our permit simply states that we just need to have a supervisor on site that's qualified during landfill operation hours. So that would be 6 days a week, 7 to 3:30. That's the only requirement.
You said that's qualified. What's the definition of qualified?
That depends who you ask. I mean, they need to know the landfill, need to know regulations, need to know what our permit consists of.
So there's not a set licensing or anything?
No, it's not a license issue, no.
Sorry.
Where we are is basically the permit requires to have 3. We can hire another full-time position, which has been done in the past at a cost additional money. That's part of what goes into the fees because this is an enterprise fund. So to the credit of staff, there's been a strategic approach to try to do this at a lesser cost so that fees don't have to be increased. this is an MD-driven requirement for a customer service supervisor that's on site. So we could go back to the old way of keeping a full-time position if the commissioners so choose. This has been presented before, or we can go this route or some modification in between.
Well, at the time, I'm not ready to make a decision on this. I would like to hear the commissioners' comments and pleasure, how you want to proceed.
I'll come back to that comment real quick. The operator position, we had an operator that was set to retire this summer. Has that position been filled?
Paperwork has been turned in. It's
Okay.
not been presented to the commissioners at this point.
Okay.
Paperwork is
in the
turned in for
process.
Is that going to be
Process of
It's in
being filled,
process.
yes.
approved? Is that coming forward?
It's been advertised. It's been, I believe you've made this recommendation.
Yes, recommendation.
You know when that'll come before us? I mean, is that going to happen?
Yes, the retirement occurred in July.
Yeah, July 1st,
So
I believe.
it would be in September. There's no, next week you don't meet, so it'll be, could be the week after.
Okay. I'd like a little time, if that's okay. I would agree with Commissioner Klein.
So we've been out without a position. I guess I'm getting back to my commissioner comments. We've been without that main position since January. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
So, and that position is what grade?
The position we've been without?
Yeah,
grade
since January.
15.
Grade 15.
Yes, sir.
Before we had grade 15 and grade 14 acting
Okay.
as supervisors with me,
Okay.
you know, as grade.
It's been, in all fairness, it's been presented two times or three times?
I think like 3.
Three times. It's been presented to the commissioners
Commissioners,
three
I have
times.
two commissioners who want to wait. Would you want to go ahead and
Dave,
comment?
this is, in your opinion, this is the best scenario or the best cost-effective way to meet that 3 supervisor requirement?
As long as we can find the right person to do the job who's willing to do it part-time, then sure, yeah, we can make this work. If we can find the right person who has knowledge of the landfill and is willing to do this on a part-time basis, then yes.
So then, that's your fear, if we open a part-time position, is finding the correct person?
Yeah, because this is almost an on-call position. So like if Tony's on vacation, I could call away to a meeting. I might need to pick up the phone and say, hey, I need you here in an hour.
So what is in your best-case scenario, what is your best-case scenario to meet this 3 supervisor requirement?
In my,
Yeah, in your opinion, is this, because it sounds like this is a good way, but there might be a better way.
I mean, obviously, a full-time position makes it a lot easier just to come and go as we please. You know, Tony gets called out quite a bit with his recycling coordinator position. You know, I'm called to meetings from time to time, you know, but we can make this work if it gets approved.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I would like to wait.
That's 3 commissioners wanting to wait. We'll put this back on the agenda in the future. Thank you.
Could I ask a question for something to be brought back when this is brought back again? I understand we're doing this for budgetary concerns. I applaud everyone for that. My understanding is our mechanics at the landfill have recently assumed some responsibilities for the heavy-duty equipment from the water department. It's now being repaired at the landfill. Will that give the landfill like financial credit that for doing work that would be performed in another department, another enterprise zone? Would that bring in more revenues to help create a full-time supervisor position?
Commissioner, what we're attempting to do is to consolidate both the parts of the division, the Department of Water Quality and the solid waste. We've got 2 mechanics out at the solid waste department, and we've got 1 mechanic at water quality. What we are proposing to do, and the only piece of equipment that right now is being transferred over, is being maintained at solid waste, is the street sweeper. All the rest of our heavy equipment is still being maintained down at the Water Quality Department. But what we are proposing to do and what we're looking at doing is for efficiency, to take all of our heavy equipment and move it over to solid waste and let them deal nothing but heavy equipment, and taking the smaller pickup trucks, cars, and smaller equipment and moving that down to water quality, so that we can get some efficiencies there. And then we can also use people back and forth when we need support at solid waste. We could use our mechanic at the water quality. If we need help in water quality, we could use it in solid waste. That's our goal, and that's our hope.
My only question is, since they are separate enterprise funds, we should be accounting for that separately, I would think. Maybe Sarah would be the person to answer, but if we could get credit on the landfill side, I would imagine it's more expensive to work on heavy-duty equipment than it is later-duty equipment. You don't take a bulldozer to Jiffy Lube, and I know that's an gross oversimplification, but.
The way I would,
might not
the
fit
way I
in
would
the bag.
anticipate it would be that any work that was done in solid waste would be charged to the water quality account, so they would be getting credit for it.
Okay, well, listen, thank you for your report. I'd like to move forward to the next agenda item. Thank you. Approval of the bylaws for the community organization funding. I believe I have Susan and Krista listed. Susan, please come forward. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As stated, I'm Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management, and this presentation also is presented by Krista Hart, who will be staying up front in her position as County Clerk. We're requesting approval of the bylaws for the Community Organization Funding Committee as presented. The purpose of the Community Organization Fund Committee is to render a fair and ethical review of all community organization funding grant applications submitted by eligible nonprofit organizations and make annual allocation recommendations to the commissioners no later than January 15th by the current bylaws of each year. The committee shall be comprised of 1 ex officio non-voting chair from the Office of Grant Management and 5 voting members appointed by the commissioners, each having 1 representative. Member terms will be consecutive with commissioner terms, not to exceed 2 consecutive terms. As frame of reference, the 108 list eligibility that the public hearing that was held earlier today, those organizations are then eligible to submit an application in the fall, and those applications would be reviewed by this committee. After review of the bylaws, last adopted in 2012, Ms. Hart and I agreed that several factors needed to be updated. Under the former bylaw 3, membership, it was written that voting members cannot serve on any boards or hold leadership roles in any organizations currently receiving funding allocations or requesting funding allocations. This made finding members to serve on that committee very difficult. This topic has been changed to state that a voting member shall abstain from any voting process in which that member serves on the board or holds a leadership role in any organization currently receiving funding allocations. The Grant Management Office will then keep a log of any of those abstentions. This was a similar change that was made several years ago to the Gaming Commission due to the same reasons, getting people that are eligible to serve. Additionally, we are requesting that the term be changed from a 2-year term to a 4-year term, which would run consecutively with the commissioners' terms. This would alleviate the need for the commissioners to reappoint a member every 2 years and will allow their selection to run through the full terms. One other thing I wanted to make note of, there is a change made to the January 15th date. That has been changed to March 1st in the revised bylaws. That was after discussing that with the CFO. That is an appropriate date that these recommendations are needed, and also allows the community organization fund to be able to meet. Normally, it's been right around the holiday season, and it kind of gets it hard going up on that 15th date when we have to look at their schedules to approve and have a meeting. Any questions?
Commissioners' comments?
Susan, there was a question, I think we talked about this a while back, that on this board, how some of our other boards work, if there's an unexpired term and a member is appointed to fill that unexpired term, that one partial term doesn't count as a full term in office, but it didn't work that way on this particular board. Has that been changed, or are we leaving that the same way?
If you look at the bylaws, that it states under membership B terms, that a partial term shall not be applied to term limits when this.
Commissioners' comments? Recommended motion to approve. Thoughts?
Motion to approve.
Second.
First and a second, any comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Next up, Hagerstown Urban Improvement Project Grant Agreement. Welcome back, Susan.
All right, still morning. Good morning again. I'm Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. I'm here requesting a motion to approve the presented sub-recipient agreements for execution to the Urban Improvement Project partners for their consideration and formal approval by their respective boards. Allow for non-substantive modifications to those agreements with the concurrence of the county attorney, and upon execution of the subrecipient agreements, approve the execution of the fiscal year 19 capital projects grant agreement between the state of Maryland and the county. I'm going to make a change to that requested motion only because the capital grant project grant agreement, I would prefer if we could go ahead with that rather than wait to have the other one documents executed, just to allow us to submit that to the state, because it does take some time for them to sign and get it back to us. That way all those documents could be being reviewed at the same point, and it wouldn't hold up everything, if that would be allowable by
Could you make that motion separate so we could?
Okay. You want me to do that now or at the end of any
Commissioners,
discussion?
Casey makes that motion now. Please go ahead and make that separate in the language you
Okay,
recommend.
try that. I would like to have a motion to approve the subrecipient agreements after they have been reviewed by their partners, and with any non-substantive changes, go forward with those. But I would like to have approval to submit the grant agreement for the 2019 capital bond bill, to go ahead and get approval for that separately so that we could go ahead and submit that today without waiting for review.
Legal comment
there
on
any-
that, or acceptable? Okay, hearing that motion, is there any comments or a motion to approve? Second, anything?
But you're doing two motions, right?
Or, yeah, this is a separate one here for this, and we'll do the others.
Okay.
Make the motion as recommended.
Okay.
Is there a second? I have a first and a second. Any comments? If not, approval for this separate motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
And that is for the grant agreement, not the
Yes,
sub. I just want to
please.
clarify that. All right, going forward, in 2018, the Hagerstown Urban Improvement Project received a $1.5 million capital bond bill award. This was the first of 5 years of capital bond bill funding that totaled $7.5 million. The bond bill language designated Washington County as the grantee, the Maryland Theater, the Washington County Board of Education, and the University System of Maryland Hagerstown as the beneficiaries. As the grantee, the county entered into a subrecipient agreement with the beneficiaries. Revisions to the subrecipient agreement are now necessary to accurately reflect allocation of funds and allow flexibility to maximize the use of all grant funds. These revisions will ensure that the UIP project utilizes the maximum amount of state funding provided through the capital bond bill within the restrictions placed by eligible costs and prevailing wage requirements. Discussions with Washington County Public School staff have indicated that the BISFA project will not have sufficient eligible costs to utilize their $2.5 million allocation of bond bill funding. In addition, the Maryland Theater is restricted on accepting additional state bond bill funding in excess of the $5 million allocated to them from the bond bill due to Maryland prevailing wage requirements. Should approval be provided upon the agreements presented today, any substantive requests from subrecipients will be brought forward before the board for formal approval. I want to draw your attention to the chart. I think that's probably the most efficient way to go over all the changes made. As stated, this is a 5-year agreement from the state to give bond bill funding. In year 1, 2018, the amount of the bond bill was $1.5 million. There was no revision necessary needed here. The entire amount is allocated to the BISFA project. In year 2, the amount of the bond bill was $750,000. That amount was changed from $500,000 to $750,000, and that it reflects what the grant agreement given to the county states. So we needed to make that adjustment because of that. Money was brought forward from year 5 and put in year 2 by the state. $345,255 will be directed in 2000 from the 2019 allocation to the county for reimbursement for the portion of the design expenses that we paid for the Maryland Theater expansion. That was discussed May 7th on this Board of County Commissioner meeting, that once we receive that allocation reimbursement refunded back to us, that those funds would be then directed to the Maryland Theater as local money in support of that project. $250,000 will be designated for reimbursement to the county for the $5 million forward funding loan to the Maryland Theater. And I just want to clarify that the forward funding agreement is in place, and that money has already been reimbursed to the Maryland Theater, but the bond bill is how the county gets reimbursed for that forward funding. We basically were giving a loan to the Maryland Theater because their portion of the bond bill was not going to be available to 21 and 22, and to give the cash flow necessary for that project. So when I refer to that, that's why it's stated in that manner, to avoid any confusion. The remaining balance of the $154,745 will be directed to the Board of Education, conditioned upon the board's need for the funds. If they have indicated that they believe about $1.5 million, give or take, would be what they have as eligible costs. So if they needed these funds, it will go to that project. If they do not utilize those funds, the funds will be directed to the theater or any other component of the UIP, including the plaza, as a recipient of the funds based upon need and ability to accept the funds. In year 3, the amount of the bond bill is $500,000, and it will be designated for reimbursement to the county for the $5 million forward funding loan, the Board of Education, or any other UIP component. And then in the next 2 years, the amount $2.5 million in 2021, and in year 2022, $2,250,000. It will be the same language. First going to reimbursement for the $5 million, then to the BOE or any other UIP component. Any questions?
Your recommendation is to approve these modifications as presented with your.
Yes, my recommendation would be to allow the flexibility to maximize the state funds for the project.
Commissioners, any questions?
Motion to approve.
First and second, any further questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to Kendall McPeak. She put many hours on getting these agreements.
You're up again. Community organization funding, service priority areas. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. I'm requesting a motion to approve the community organization funding service priority areas and their respective available funding amounts as presented or amended. The Community Organization Funding Committee is preparing for the fiscal year 2021 application and review process, and as agreed upon, the Board of County Commissioners will annually determine and approve the service priority area eligible to receive funding consideration. The board shall also set or approve the total available funding that should be dedicated to each established service priority area. Historically, the board has funded 6 service priority areas, which are arts and culture, domestic violence, families and children, recreation, seniors, and other. These service priority areas have encompassed and included all applications received and have not excluded any organization from making application for funding. For the purposes of the committee's fiscal year 2021 considerations, Washington County's Chief Financial Officer has indicated $774,000 is available for distribution. This amount is a reduction of $926,000 from the previous funding level of $1.7 million in 2020. The reduction reflects the removal of the Commission on Aging and the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts from the process and placing them in individual line items within the county's operating budget. This total is subject to adjustment as the fiscal year 2021 budget is discussed. It is the recommendation of the county CFO and the Director of Office Grant Management that the amount of funding made available for each respective service priority area be set as indicated below. Arts and culture, $107,810. Domestic violence, $306,900. Families and children, $255,380. Recreation, $27,000. Seniors, $67,110. Other, $9,800, and that is a total of $774,000. As agreed upon by the board, the committee does have the latitude to move 10% from each area, from one service priority area to another every year, but that amount will then be reset the next year.
How were these percentages figured since we removed $926,000? I'm assuming they've been adjusted because seniors received a large portion of it.
Right.
And so how are these new percentages came about?
We didn't, when I went and looked at it, adjusting it, if we just went by the percentages, it would have been skewed because seniors had such a large component of the senior allocation went to the Commission on Aging. So simply, the numbers were determined from subtracting what the historical amount that was awarded to the COA, or the Commission on Aging, and the Museum of Fine Arts from their category. So previously, the arts and culture category had $227, $810. We subtracted $120,000 from that. And then in the seniors category, it was $873,110 previously, and they received $106,000 historically. So we subtracted that amount. So then what's basically taking those two organizations out of consideration.
And
then the percentage were adjusted based upon, the amounts were adjusted, and then the percentages fell in place, if that makes sense.
More questions?
And this is just from my understanding. I guess what's the reasoning for this limitations? Because if, if the COF was bound, 100% bound by these, but they wanted to give more money to a great cause for a great need, and why are we, binding them by this, where there could be another cause in another section that just might not be as good, but we have to give them that money by this? So, what was, I guess, the rationale for coming up with these percentages?
I believe when it originally went to this process, part of it was looked at, well, number one, to have diversity, to see that there was not going to be just everything going into one type of programming. The other consideration was looking at what had previously been funded to make sure that it wasn't going, that organizations who had been funded prior to this process just through the county's budget, we kept somewhat consistent, so there wasn't a year where they had received a certain amount of money and then this process came in and it just completely, their amount of funding went from several $100,000 to zero, just to try to keep it manageable in that way. But at this point, it's your discretion of what any decisions
Prior
to
to
changes.
this process, it was basically if you knew this money existed, you had the advantage of applying for it.
Right.
Now with the process and the application, we have a more equitable way of allowing
Right.
everyone to,
It's fair, everything is
with
scored.
a limited amount of funding, but a more fair way
Right.
of evaluating. I do know the members on this committee do a lot of work because they're handed 40 applications plus and put an hour, maybe or more evaluating, and then you meet in a group to make these decisions.
Correct. They usually look at about 40 to 50 applications, and it takes, they're long applications, and includes tax return information, things of that nature, financial documentation. So there's a lot of work put into that scoring, and then they meet in one all-day session to make the funding recommendations.
I guess I think the scoring and all of that I think is great. I guess I don't know why we have to put a limitation on other recreations or arts and culture. I don't know why we need a limitation for them. Now I understand there's a 10% leeway, but if an organization came here with an amazing great cause and they fit in the other category, then we're saying, well, by this I can only give you $9,800 and then 10% above that. So I'm giving you, what would that be? $10,700 is the max I can give you. Or
Right.
the max of that organization, that category split between however many people that would be. I guess that's my only concern with it.
Commissioners, any other comments? Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Or second?
I'll second if I could have
There'll be discussion. A first and a second. Any comments or discussion?
So Court, would you suggest maybe changing the 10% leeway adjustment, making that a little larger?
Yeah, I would like to see a change in either the percentages or making a change in the 10%. I just don't like having these set dollar figures.
What happens next year if another category is overloaded and another category, we're constantly changing the rules?
Well, that's.
And one other comment, we're not supposed to be the full funding for a source for this. This is to assist them. So if there's a organization with a lot of need, they need to apply.
Well, I'm not just saying it, I'm not saying it could be one organization. You could have, let's say you could have a lot of organizations in one category, and then we're cutting that, and then all of a sudden, an organization in another category, we only have 2 applications, but they get a much bigger pie just because we set this arbitrary percentage. That's where I'm looking at it. And I'll just give an example. Let's say we had 20 domestic violence charities coming, and we all partially funded their, or the COF recommended that we partially fund those 20 organizations because they were all good causes. But then at that same point, arts and culture came in, and we had 2 people. And because of that 2 people, we wrote them $50,000 checks, where the domestic violence, the max we could write there is,
Isn't that part of the discussion of the groups that they determine to all one category? If there's 10 people, do they all divide it up equally? Do they decide priorities?
What I'm saying is this is the max that they can receive.
Yeah, I don't know. I've discussed this for.
That's what I'm saying. This is the max that they're getting, and if they can partially decide, or they can do whatever. But if you're taking, this is the max I can give this section, that's where my concern is.
So Susan, do we approve this each year, or are we only approving this because we had to change with the line item?
Every year this is presented for approval.
Well, then why don't we consider adding another $900,000 to this fund, since we took 2 companies or 2 organizations and made a line item? That would be a more fair and equitable way. And that would eliminate your comment there.
It still doesn't, because then you're still having the percentages.
I would be willing to give it a try for like, are you thinking 20, 25%?
If you did 20%, I think that'd be better, because then it gives more leeway for them to fund the organizations that they're thinking have the most needs.
I would be willing to give it a try for a year and see if it gives our committee much headache.
It just gives them more flexibility.
And the motion has to be withdrawn and reworded.
Okay.
Whoever made the motion.
Let me ask another question. Have we ever run into this issue where it became an issue?
They have reallocated 10%.
They've never reallocated 10%?
They have reallocated 10%. Historically,
Could they have reallocated more?
they probably would have if they had the opportunity to reallocate more, but
Well,
they did
then
not.
I'll withdraw my motion. We accept it to 20% instead of 10%.
So what happens to the category then that you take 20% from, and they're saying they're underfunded now?
That's what.
You have the final say.
Yeah, and the board record.
How many years have we been following these percentages and this number? Since when?
The number has changed over the years, but I believe it was in 2012 was the initial process. But the
When you
10%
say the numbers have changed, has
has
the 10% changed over the
no,
years?
the 10% has not changed.
And like the comment was said, is that they probably would have given it to a different organization if they had the opportunity. So
If we had an additional 900,000, we'd solve this problem right now.
But
Are you supporting that 900,000?
I'm not making that motion. All right, we have first and a second on the floor to add the change to 20%. Any other questions, comments?
Is it 20 or 25?
I'm 20's fine.
20. Okay, you got the first and second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the list. Proposed payment in lieu of taxes pilot agreement for Solar Hagerstown LLC. Please introduce yourself and address, sir. Welcome.
My name is Justin Fike. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm representing the Solar Hagerstown project. We're basically, per the state code, requesting payment in lieu of taxes for a solar project that we're developing here. The project is a 10 megawatt project. It is situated on about 70 acres of land that we'll be using just south of the Wholesome cement plant. And we will sell the electricity that we generate from the solar project to the cement plant under a long-term power purchase agreement. The project got a special exception back in 2017. The company I work for recently bought the rights to develop that project in early this year, and we're moving that project forward and trying to get it built and completed so we can, basically offset some of the energy used by the Wholesome plant and stabilize the electricity rates that they're paying over the next 20 years or so. The project will also contribute towards the renewable portfolio standard, which I think you guys are familiar with based on some other similar pilot requests in the county. We are currently working through the rest of the permitting approvals with the goal of getting Planning Commission approval for the site plan later this year and hopefully kicking off construction of the project by the end of the year. I think the only other thing I would mention that's hopefully not throwing a monkey wrench into the approval process, but it seems to me, based on a lot of discussion over the last couple months, that you guys have made it pretty clear as far as the types of expectations around the pilot that you're looking to, be willing to enter into. When we originally requested this, we requested it as $6,000 a megawatt for 35 years, and it sounds like, there's been quite a bit of discussion, and it seems like the landing spot has been $6,500 a megawatt for 25 years. So, I think we'd be happy to amend our request to be consistent with the other solar projects. We're not looking for, special treatment relative to the other projects that have been approved in the last couple of months.
This isn't on Wholesome property though, right?
It is actually.
They own the property?
Yeah, so we would lease the
It's
project, we would lease the land from them, and we would sell the power to them.
So it's south, it's on the southern end of the property?
Yes. Just south of the Antietam Creek.
The company that you work for, do they have solar projects in other counties in the state of Maryland?
Yeah, so the company that owns the Solar Hagerstown project is called Greenbacker Renewable Energy Corporation. That is a public company. It has about 6,000 shareholders around the country, and we invest in and own and operate renewable energy projects similar to this all over the country. So we have about 350 megawatts of projects around the country, and that is largely solar, some wind projects, and one biomass project. As far as Maryland, we're, as you've seen, there's quite a bit of activity in Maryland. We're actively looking at the market, and we're currently wrapping up a 6 megawatt project in Kent County. That's under construction right now, should be operational by the end of the year.
You say Greenbacker's a public company?
Yeah.
Is it a Reg D offering?
I think it is. Don't quote me on that. It's publicly, it's a public company, but it's not publicly traded.
I'm going to have to recuse myself from any vote involving Greenbacker.
They're on Wholesome property. I'm looking at it. They're already amended to follow what we've done in the past. I mean, I don't think I have any other questions.
Has this project, have you started the project at all yet? So how far along is the project?
So the project is still making its way through development. So where we're at right now is we just got out of the concept review stage with the Planning Commission. We're going to be submitting the site plan approval.
You haven't broke ground, is what Terry said.
No. So we're still in kind of design. We're finalizing the design with the county. That'll have to go in front of the Planning Commission here to get approval. And we're finalizing the interconnection design with the utility. And then, basically once those two designs are completed, and if we get all the necessary approvals, then the project would break ground, we'd move forward.
I think it sounds like you've been paying attention to what's going on here in Washington County when it comes to pilots for solar projects. And while I certainly support solar, I think it's important for the environment. There's some good that can come out of renewable energy. I'm not a proponent of the tax incentive, the payment lift taxes. I don't think that's fair to our citizens. And I know this is slightly, it's a very similar concept to what we've seen before. Especially in the same year that there's a tax increase, there would be a tax break here, and that's what it is. I don't know if you were in our office here when we started our commissioner meeting, but a lot of us talked about what we saw and witnessed in the seminars we partook in at MACO. Were you at MACO by any chance? Okay.
I was not.
Okay, we met with the Maryland Public Service Commission, and there were 4 representatives from 4 different counties. 3 of those counties had concerns about solar, and about 100 other people were lobbyists or lawyers or representatives of solar companies. The comment that was made, I think fits perfectly well, is our low property values is incentive enough to put up the solar projects. So I think we're going to be inundated with these requests simply because of our low property value. They're not going in Montgomery County. By and large, there probably will be on rooftops, but not to any large scale like this or other projects that we've seen. They're not going in Baltimore City. They're going to come here, and it's our low property values is the incentive that, we've seen projects already get started without a tax break. So,
Well,
Yeah,
it's a quick question. You're on wholesome property. They're already on the tax rolls. So, question maybe to Rob, if this is going to generate $2 million more taxes, explain that if,
So we've looked at this before through SDAT and Todd Hershey's office, and it's a fairly complex issue. And so I can't report to you exactly how that would work, either with or without the pilot, because the assessed of the improvements, and perhaps you have additional insight from your experience with the other county in Maryland, the improvements can be assessed according to various criteria.
Right.
And I apologize, but that's something we haven't seen one come to success.
well, I guess the bottom line is I'd have to trust the figure it's going to increase taxes by 2.1 million over the course of the thing. And I'd also have to say that it's on wholesome property. I'd also have to say that the community as a whole, including the county, supports wholesome. And you're serving wholesome by providing them energy. So it's a joint effort between you and wholesome, obviously. So why in the world would we not do this? I don't get it, So
I'm in agreement with Mr. Wagner, so if you're finished your presentation, there's a motion to accept the proposal. I hear a motion to approve.
That was a motion?
Oh,
Oh, no.
yeah, I'm asking for a motion, right?
Oh, I thought you said we had a motion.
Looking for a motion.
I would motion to approve according to what you can actually help me with this, even though you can't vote.
Yeah, previous ones were $6,500 for 25 years.
Right, according to
And yes.
previous pilots.
With a decommissioned bond.
Right.
So Randy, it'd be your suggestion to move those figures?
Yes, that'd be the motion, actually.
You have a motion on the floor, is there a second? Baker, second. Hearing none, dies of a second. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Amazing.
All right. Emergency medical service, special procedures and auditing. Mr. Hayes, welcome.
Good afternoon. I get to say good afternoon, I think, the first time.
Yeah.
You got those?
Wouldn't matter.
Good afternoon, David Hayes, Director of Emergency Services.
Kim Edlin, Director of Budget and Finance.
So, Commissioners, we're here today to provide an update and information on requests that were given to county staff relative to proposals for audits for the 8 independent EMS agencies and the inclusion of the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association. So the county personnel drafted the request for proposals, or the RFP, for special procedures in accounting or auditing services. The public accounting profession offers a number of services, each designed to focus decisions on a particular need. Specific to auditing, the purpose of an audit is for the CPA firm to provide an opinion on the financial statements as whole and whether they comply with generally accepted accounting principles. The report is a measure of the reliability of the financial statements. On some occasions, an auditor is unable to complete an accurate audit report. This may occur for a variety of reasons, such as an absence of appropriate financial records. When this happens, the auditor issues a disclaimer of opinion, stating that an opinion of the firm's financial status could not be determined. A second form included in financial reporting is called attestation, and will be addressed in this proposal as well, and that is agreed upon procedures, or AUP. An AUP engagement offers the client greater flexibility than what a traditional audit can provide. It is likely to be more suitable than an audit for specific procedures addressing a particular need. In an AUP, the agreement will be between the county and the CPA firm to perform procedures within the company's. An AUP does not include an opinion, but the client does receive a final report that is based upon their agreed upon procedures. AUPs provide the details and results of each procedure performed. An AUP is used to meet all needs that an audit cannot address. The RFP, as written, has 2 options. Option 1 is related to a set of agreed upon procedures, and option 2 is a financial statement audit. The RFP is written to provide the Board of County Commissioners flexibility in choosing option 1, option 2, or to include both options in exercising our forward motion. The RFP is currently set to be advertised on Friday, August 30th. Any requests for changes must be made by August 28th to meet that deadline. We obviously can push the advertising date back if needed. Financial impact, we do not know at this time. Concurrences is not applicable, and the alternatives are to modify the RFP. What staff have done to try to give a snapshot of the difference between the two with the financial audit, and you should have these in front of you now. And I want to indicate and emphasize in either option or both options, staff have recognized your desire to expedite the process to the greatest capacity. So you'll see we have built into each a recommendation for a performance incentive, which would include a $500 per day incentive up to 90 days, a max of $45,000 incentive for early completion of the final report. The scope of the audit covers 180 days. And again, we could potentially get the audit in as early as 90 if somebody exercises the full performance incentive. And Kim will help me here in some of these areas where I may not be as proficient in the details of the documents. But an audit test, the auditor is going to test the financial data, and the CPA will select random sets of data and look at that comparative to industry processes and procedures. And they'll look at account analysis, and then they'll look at reporting. Each of those, in staff's opinion, don't completely address the conversations that we've heard from the commissioners about transparency and openness. We did look at the other side of this, and that's the agreed upon procedures or attestation, and we feel that that actually comes into a better picture of the things that you've been asking about where they're spending their money, how they're spending their money, the types of expenses that there are. Also going deeper into some of the issues that we've saw of late, specifically with Smithsburg and maybe even some of the other companies relative to 401k disbursements, wage and hourly payments relative to overtime, compliance with ERISA guidelines, coming on out into looking at the specifics of where money is spent, i.e. travel. It could be anything from cell phones, it could be anything from furniture, to look at those things. So in the agreed upon procedures, we've written a scope there that we believe answer many of the questions that you have chosen or at least spoken to us, or we've had discussion in open session meetings. And again, if you look at that, when we go down the description of agreed upon procedures, we're going to look at payroll. We're going to look at 100% of their employees, meaning who they are, look at that over 2 pay periods, review W-2s, 1099s, 401k, benefit programs, making sure that what is spelled out as a benefit program in a handbook or some type of policy is actually what the employee is receiving. And then coming back in material weaknesses on internal controls, and some of those things are going to be who has the authority to spend what, how much, and if you're outside of budgeted items, who has the authority to offer those expenses. We're going to look at, and this again is the agreed upon procedures, this would look at are volunteers paid for activities relative to fundraising, any of those issues. And if you come on across to the second page, and I'm trying to get through this so that we don't belabor this, we're going to look at a 10% review of expenditures over $1,000, and we're going to look at a 5% review of expenditures under $1,000. We know that the expenses under $1,000 are likely to be greater than, in number, than what they are over $1,000. 100% of travel, and again, we talked about 100% of employees. And I'll let Kim chime in here if she's got anything additional that we haven't hit on the surface, and then if you have any questions, we'll try to answer those for you.
I don't have anything to add. You've done a great job.
Nice. All right.
So for clarification, Commissioners, the RFP is the request for a proposal that is scheduled to go out on Friday. You don't have to make any decisions as far as what's presented. The RFP will bring back prices for both auditing and for agreed upon procedures. At that point, at the award point, you can make the decision knowing what the price is of each, what you
We're
choose to.
basically agreeing just to put it out for proposal.
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
What are we just putting strictly EMS out for a proposal this time, right?
Yeah, so let me run through 4 additional bullet points real quick.
All right.
I made a little cheat sheet expecting we may get some questions like this. So who's affected? If it's chosen, the attestation review will include all 8 EMS companies and the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, sorry about that. And if chosen for a financial audit, it will include 7 of the 8 EMS companies in the WCVFRA. The reason it's 7 and not 8 is Community Rescue Service already completes a full audit annually, and that will be available to us.
Is that an outside audit?
It is.
Okay.
That is actually done by Smith Elliott and has been for probably 30-some years.
So the first one, there was one less because they community rescue. What the first one again would be? What
The actual full audit, the audit itself would only get 7 of the 8 EMS companies.
Right.
We will have 8 audits in hand. We just don't need to pay for that 8th audit. It's already being paid for.
And the other one would. Why would the other one do 8 of 8? I missed something here. I think. Did you? They both would be 7 of 8.
That's the agreed upon.
The agreed upon procedures would get all 8 EMS companies and the WCVFRA, because that's not the audit.
I got you. I got you.
That's the difference.
Okay.
And if you chose both of them, then you're going to get everybody if that's the direction you choose. We believe from conversations, at least our understanding of conversations from the commissioners, that the agreed upon procedures, the attestation side of this would be sufficient to answer the questions you've brought forward. But again, the ultimate decision is yours.
Is this, I'll call cheat sheet here, being put out in the RFP?
We did not. That was just for our internal review. We can certainly include that if you'd like.
Well,
But the procedures are included in the RFP.
Yes, that's taken directly out of the RFP.
because one of the things that I know I specifically asked for was the 5,500, making sure the 5,500 has been.
That should be the ERISA compliance, is that not right?
It should stay, because ERISA compliance, that can be talking about right here where we're saying the 401k deferrals and 401k employer contributions, they could have completed those perfectly fine, but they misfiled their 5,500.
Got it. So you would like that added to the RFP, correct?
It's actually in here, report. In addition, determine if the summary plan description, summary annual report, and annual 5,500 filing is available or completed. Is that adequate, or should it be further? I'm sorry, sir, that's on page 2.
Yeah, I see that, but I want to make sure that it's been done correctly, not that it's just completed. Because of other incidents that we have seen or heard from, I want to make sure that they have been completed correctly.
About is available and completed appropriately.
Perfect. Since we're looking already at the 401k deferrals and the 401k contributions, we want to make sure that that information has been appropriately reported on the 5,500
We
file.
can certainly add that without.
So you're going to bring back pricing, and then we're going to make a decision of which one we want to do, because there's the audit's going to be more expensive, correct?
We believe so.
Yeah, and I've always said that from the beginning, I want an audit, but I'll wait and see what we don't have to do that today, right?
We're just going to vote to put it up for proposal, both options.
Yeah, you can do one, not the other. You can flip those, or you can do them both.
Well, there's no
And whatever you
cost-
give us in that,
There's
commissioners
no
will
cost to us to
advertise.
put them both out at the same time, is there? So
We can certainly do
That would
that.
be my recommendation, to get pricing on both, to give us a better level of understanding how far or what we want to do.
And should we also, on here, and I did not see it, but make sure that that the 990s have been reported appropriate?
So any of those mandatory reports, we want to make sure that we add a language that says appropriate to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Dave, back to the 7 companies getting audited, CRS doesn't. None of the other EMS companies remaining?
They do not, and we confirmed that, the CFO actually confirmed that for today's conversation, so we had that here available to you. Kim will give you the readout. You just want to go through that?
Yes, so Williamsport, Halfway, Hancock, Boonesboro, Smithsburg get a compilation. So compilations are basically just taking their information, compiling them, and generating a financial statement. Sharpsburg and Clear Spring do it themselves, I believe, and Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association gets a review, which is one level higher than a compilation, but it's below an audit.
It's an outside review?
Yes. Compilations and reviews would be done typically by outside firms.
Dave, you were with CRS for a number of years. Do you have any idea how much they pay for an outside review? And might we be able to say, okay, they operate this many stations, so it'd likely be a percentage of that?
Yeah, I think their current is $14,500
Is what
what they pay. They by far are the largest company, so I won't speak, and if Kim can add something different, I would guess, and this is a guess on my part because that's not what I do, but they're a large corporation without question, and it's not that the other ones are entirely small, but you would believe that theirs would be more expensive than the other companies. But what I'd also say is CRS has been under audit now for probably 25 to 30 years, so some of their procedures are going to be more defined, more identifiable. So it may neutralize itself even in the fact that an auditor has to put more time and effort into some of the other companies that may not have had the benefit of 25 years worth of audits. So, and I think that's a conversation we shared. Is that not correct?
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Any commissioners' comments, recommendations? My opinion is to put both out for RFP. Are there any other comments?
I agree.
For the record, sir, what the 2 notes we've made before this does go out, 2 quick corrections. We'll say on page 2 under BIII, 550 filing is available and completed appropriately. And we'll have a similar 4th I suppose, for the same 4 990s. if I heard correctly.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be under B because the 990 is not under ERISA compliance.
I will look at the, we'll look at the appropriate place to put it.
Is there a motion with suggestions, Administrator Slocum? Is there a motion?
I don't think we need it.
I don't think we need.
We need one, what's the consensus to do it?
Just sets for information, we've already told you.
Can you explain kind of the coordination of how you envision this might work? Very briefly, just a minute or two, how you might work with our companies? There's a reason we're kind of overseeing the process, but can you kind of talk a little bit about how we might coordinate with them?
I'll let you answer that one, or at least try to, and I'll fill in the blanks.
I would think that it would be the people that we contract with that would contact them directly to work with them.
Okay.
So we know, Commissioner, there are going to be some areas, as an example, in the attestation procedures. One of the things we talk in there is about run sheet compliance and the availability of run sheets, which is the incident report for EMS, that there's one of those present for every patient care encounter, and then likewise moving that forward to billing, that they're moved forward appropriately there. I would expect our office is going to have to interface with the company that's selected and the individual corporations to make sure that there's a clean understanding on the auditor's part of what we're looking for. The financial side, there may be some things where Kim and Sarah's staff have to interject there, but I don't know what they are at this point. But we'll continue as we always have to try to be an advocate so that these things are as least encumbering as what they can be. But I'm sure they're going to be difficult for some, but we'll have to get through it, and we will.
You haven't seen any signs of lack of cooperation from all the companies involved, do you? Have you?
No, honestly, we were with 5 of the EMS companies yesterday in a meeting that's normally scheduled, and their only concern was, let's get them done and get through these so we can move on to the next things that are coming after that.
I have 2 questions. Early September, you're having presentation for the fire companies on all these policies.
That's correct.
Would you explain?
September the 5th, we have a scheduled meeting that the Volunteer Association has set up at our request, where Smith Elliott, representatives from Budget and Finance in our office, will be present. We've asked for strong representation from each company. That's where we'll explain going forward the review and auditing procedures that are already in place as of July 1. They'll get better information that lets them know how they're going to report moving forward, and SEK will be there to answer any questions, and I think they'll be well prepared.
And one other agreement, in this report from 2013, there's already an approved agreement between the association and the county on financial review and auditing.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So this, what
Reporting.
we're doing is not out of the ordinary, it's per policy from 2013.
Correct. It is
correct?
referenced in the 2013 document.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Hayes, I think you're back again. Welcome
Get
back.
to see me one more time.
Kim, thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Next, city county memorandum of understanding brief, Mr. Hayes.
Certainly.
Mr. Lord, welcome, Chief.
Shortly after I came to the division, Chief Lord asked me if there would be any interest on the behalf of the county to draft an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, for emergency services both in and outside of the county, or in and outside of the city, I'm sorry. That's a document that's never existed, at least to any knowledge that I can find, and probably should have existed a long time ago. And really, it doesn't change what we're going to talk about here today, what we're already doing. We're already doing all the things that are in this document at some level. It really just codifies or memorializes it and gets us in a formal document that Chief can speak to here shortly that will create some insurance credits relative to the ISO ratings for the city of Hagerstown, and likewise should offer those same credits out to the county companies that each have an ISO rating for each of the fire departments. But I'll go through the ARF, and then we'll get into a little bit more dialogue and some questions and answers if you so choose. But right now, this is just a brief. We're not here asking for you to adopt this MOU. It's in draft form. We have submitted it to the association. There is a most recent revision that probably still needs to go out to them, but it's it was some language that mayor and council had thought they would like to see in there, and our attorney's office reviewed that, and we put a reciprocal language for the county as well. But in an effort to codify fire rescue and EMS services in all areas of Washington County, the Hagerstown Fire Chief and the Director of Emergency Services have been working collectively to formulate an automatic mutual aid memorandum of understanding, otherwise known as MOU. The MOU works to identify each elected body's responsibility and stated commitment relative to providing the citizens of Washington County with timely and effective emergency services. The intent of city and county staff is to draft a document that addresses key issues in the delivery of emergency services. Examples include incident command, otherwise known at a federal level as NIMS, closest unit, financial responsibility, workers' comp and insurance issues, and other, etc. The current plan is to present the final product to the commissioners and the mayor and council for subsequent approval as the authorities having jurisdiction, also known as AHJ, after a review and comment period is concluded. In drafting the document, staff have sought both county and city legal counsel throughout the process. Additionally, we offered the initial draft of the MOU document to the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Leadership Team on July 13th, 2019, and subsequently on August 6, 2019, after a joint meeting between both DES and WCVFRA leadership. County staff have requested that the WCVFRA leadership provide final comment by August 30, 2019. Today's brief is intended to provide the document to the commissioners for initial input during its draft stages in an effort to finalize the document for future presentation to both the commissioners and the mayor and council for adoption/execution. A final review by county staff has authored one additional change to better reflect the legal responsibilities of both the BOCC and the Hagerstown mayor and council. An updated copy with the specified change has also been forwarded to the leadership of the WCVFRA on August 19, 2019. Fiscal impact to codify services will allow for improved insurance ratings, training, and collaboration in the execution of services. Concurrences from the county administrator, alternatives are not applicable, and then the attachments are the actual MOU itself. The MOU really addresses four key components. In my opinion, the chief can certainly feel free to add into that. It addresses the authority having jurisdiction. It establishes that we're going to establish incident command on every incident. We already do that. It establishes that we're going to run the closest unit regardless of political jurisdiction. Now, when we talk about that specific issue, that does not mean that we're not going to send what we call the fire department having jurisdiction, which may be the county department if the service is in the county, or likewise, if the call is in the city, that we would still send the city engine along with the county engine if it's closer than the city unit. But really, it's a citizens first approach. It puts the life ahead of anything else, which is where I live, and I think I can speak that's where the chief lives. It addresses insurance issues relative to workers' comp, that each party is going to be responsible for providing those insurances for our staff, whether that's career or volunteer in the county. In the city, it would be the career staff. And it establishes, what's the fourth one I'm missing?
Acknowledgement that neither party would seek reimbursement of costs.
Yeah. So those are really the four principal areas. I do know in conversation with President Moncrief just a short time ago, the WCVFRA may seek some additional language that talks about the volunteer companies could be considered third party, and that they likewise wouldn't be in a position where the city could potentially bill them or that they would bill the city. So I think that's more, their concerns seem to be more relative to exposure to have cost billed back to them from the city. But that's really where we are at this point. They've had some random questions here, and I've tried to answer those through email throughout the time. And again, we're looking for a formal response from them by August 30 if there's anything additional outside of that. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Chief?
I would concur with everything the directors had to say, and simply remind the board that public safety is a time and distance service. So closest matters. The insurance industry recognizes that in their public protection rating schedule. So when I landed here in 2015, Chief Dietrich had handed to me the most recent ISO, Insurance Services Office evaluation of the City of Hagerstown Fire Department. And there was two things that jumped out at me at that time that were not resident. One, an automatic aid agreement. And two, the fact that even though we all operate under the same telecommunications system, 911 center, we had multiple ratings across the county. And I knew that both of those were problematic. And for the lack of a better description, really easy fixes if we just identified, where that drop ball was. So this, from a citizen standpoint, certainly provides the closest resource. And in cases where it is arbitrary or the political boundaries are so obscure, we have agreed to send both resources initially so that the citizen always benefits from that on high acuity calls. Secondly, by doing so and recognizing that there's a difference between automatic aid and mutual aid. Traditionally, mutual aid is the first company goes, they have a bigger event than what they thought they did, and now they ask for help. So there's a time distance delay there. Automatic aid is we agree before the call is dispatched that we're going to share resources, and it's reflected in the CAD dispatch, it's reflected in the run cards, and the citizens are going to get the best benefit from that. So this is very much an automatic and mutual aid agreement. I don't want to repeat what the director said. I think that this is very equitable level of in-kind services. We acknowledge that neither party will seek reimbursement of costs from the other, and I think that's particularly important as we evolve into the type of service that we're delivering. For instance, I have 78 employees in the City of Hagerstown Fire Department. About 24 of them work part-time for you in the county on their days off. So that offers an opportunity for cross-contamination, et cetera, who is working for who at any given minute, and all those kind of things. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the hard work of both the county legal team and the city legal team for getting us to this point. So I think this is a positive thing for both governments, and it would be my recommendation that you move forward with this at the earliest opportunity. It's been four years in the making.
Yeah, it's just a question or comment. A lot of this is due to the regular boundaries of Hagerstown just not being a square, and you have crossover of services or who's first due, who's the closest. Would that not be
It certainly presents
some of
its
the
challenges.
discussion on this?
So you're absolutely correct, President Klein. I don't know of a more irregular municipal boundary than maybe Fort Worth, Texas. I've had the opportunity to traipse around the country a little bit. The City of Hagerstown boundary is pretty irregular. Nonetheless, it shouldn't interfere with public safety. So by having a document between the two governing bodies and those with primary responsibility for public safety, we have the ability to fix that with a handshake, gentleman's agreement.
I see this is for consideration only. Is there any more comments from the commissioners or questions?
Just a real quick question. Since currently all of our stations are volunteer stations, does each individual station need to sign off on this agreement?
No, the position that we're bringing forward here today is you, as the authority having jurisdiction globally, is the group that needs to sign the document. Likewise, it's the same with the mayor and council and not the Hagerstown Fire Department. So this is at the 35,000 foot level. They operate down probably around the 25,000 foot. And when we first started this conversation, a little bit more history to this, originally I think the chief had thought the 4 companies around the city, but my position was at any given day, we've got Williamsport, we've got Smithsburg, we've got Mount Etna transferred into the city. So this needs to be a global MOU that is between the entities that are, hold the ultimate responsibility.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both for working on this, and